Hello and welcome to Varn blog. And today we're discussing the variable systems model as designed by Stafford Beer in designing the system. Now, this is a cybernetic model that's supposed to be used for general systems, both human and animal and machine. We have to kind of parse this a little, particularly because people talking about the variable systems model tend to start speaking in jargon that people who are not familiar with the viable systems model really cannot understand. Not because the viable systems model is hard. It's not. It's key to cybernetics. It's one of the most interesting developments out of cybernetics, and it's used by most capitalist firms. But when we talk about the way any kind of field of inquiry or dynamic human system works, you're going to see that it applies most of the time. Now, there are 5 systems, and we're going to start with system 5 because it's the one that is the most removed, but it's what builds cohesion and autonomy. Now, this is important to understand, and this is something that a lot of socialists don't really always do. They start in the middle, either in strategy or in tactics or even in ideology. But ideology is not System 5. System 5 can be called ethos or mission or teleology. It is the orientation of a group or a machine, anything that is a complex system. The orientation of your body is to maintain itself. It is a simple principle. All right. It will sacrifice elements of your own bodily, viability to maintain its function. So, like, you'll lose fingers so that your whole body doesn't die. Now, this is an evolved system. No one designed this. It doesn't have a teleology as such beyond that. But System 5 is also, when we're talking about human systems, a human system. Now, I'm going to be pulling a lot from these books, but I'm really going to be pulling today mostly from a pamphlet by Kyle Thompson of the Variable Systems Research Unit and the General Intellect Unit fame. The Viable Systems model is a structure for building viable organizations, and they are designed to work in a hostile or non-hostile environment. Different levels of decision of the system are aimed at vertical and horizontal integration, so one is not just thinking vertically or horizontally. And it is largely designed to make something function. System 5 is the orientation, as I said. Now, how is System 5 done? Well, it's also the part that makes big decisions that affects the whole organization. These decisions are about what kind of orientation the organization wants or the system wants. Now, we talk about design systems like collectives, and we mean collectives and not aggregates, and there is a difference. Collectives are groups of people that have designed a system to implement something like a collective will. Individuals have agency. Collectives only have agency as empowered by individuals. Now, individuals are also defined in the context of each other. And in fact, their differentiation from each other is only possible because of an aggregate or collective identity. The aggregate is just when you take a type and mathematically add it all together and come up with a mean and a mode. All right. Like, we can think about this as when we think about what we think of as, say, the average popular opinion of a person in a nation. That is generally an aggregated opinion. Now, what's done with statistical sampling is open to all kinds of biases, etc., but that is what it is. A system that has a collective cohesion can have something like collective agency. Now, we're still careful not to say that it's the same as individual agency. For example, an individual in a specific system can have a lot of effect if they're at a node where that choice would matter. All right. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you're at a leadership and you're at a point where there are multiple options for your organization to take on, but there's a leader in a crucial function that has to make that decision, that's going to matter. So it's going to change the organization's future. So it's wrong to think of organizational agency as the same as human agency. But the System 5 is basically the consensus mission of the group, and let's say any big decisions that have to trickle down through all other systems. Now, generally the system's labeled ethos, System 4 is labeled strategy, System 3 is labeled auditing, our coherence, and we can talk about that because really System 3 is complicated. System 2 is coordination, and System 1 is activity or practice. System 5 is both the principles and the decision-making for those principles. Now, if you think about this as a teleological orientation in the Aristotelian sense, that actually is helpful. Problem with Aristotle thinks that teleologies exist naturally because there's an unmoved mover that emanates them, and thus everything has a function because it is designed to have a function, and that's how all life works. Unfortunately, while these systems do operate that way, they're not designed. They don't have teleoses. There's not one function for which a human being does, of which you are designed to. That implies a whole metaphysical coherence. But let's just assume you need a System 5. System 5 is what builds cohesion, like I said, and cohesion allows an aggregate to become a collective. You think about it this way. The aggregate is just a statistical sample, but a collective has systems that allow decisions to be aggregated within the system in a way that indicates general will or agency or intellect. So there is a way to collectively think through these problems. System 5 is often removed from the other parts of the system because it doesn't intervene very much. So, for example, the APA's mission is to advance the interest of doctors. It's pretty easy. It's an interest mission. The interest mission is whatever is in the interest of its members, who are doctors, physicians. All right. But let's think about the field of sociology. It also has a System 5. Its System 5 is the systemic and hopefully scientific study of society. Now, its strategies for doing that, its methodologies and research programs, its formal structures for cohering that, its System 3, its auditing function, its coordination system, its role in the academy, and its System 1, your applied activities, all are downstream from its very function. All right. Now, nothing about the function says that there's a truth criteria, for example, in sociology, and thus it can be scientific, whatever we mean by that. But we do have a structure and a mission of the field, and it's been imposed by the nature of the field. Now, if the American Sociological Association changes how they interpret that to mean, that tends to be the consensus of the field. So the System 5 can emerge informally, and in fact, it often does. It's kind of like the brain. And informality has its benefits and its tyranny. We talk about the tyranny of structuralistness all the time because you don't know where the norms are coming from. But most human norms and most human systems are not planned. Their missions emerge organically. For example, in my series on sociology, I keep pointing out that in the early 20th century and in late 19th century, there is no real distinction between sociology and economics. Now, today, when we talk about the fields in the academy, the economic department and the sociological department are often the two most opposed departments, in study. But they actually share a common root in political economy, of which they differentiated themselves from by refining their ethos, refining their System 5. So System 5 has the principal components, what you believe really matters here. This isn't an ideology either. This is more like the mission or goal. The ideology is like a justification for that goal that goes into all kinds of other things. And when you get into like different forms of Marxist theories of ideology, from the Gramsci hegemony theory to the Althusserian structural ideologies, material theory, we always have to remind ourselves that ideology is not System 5. System 5 is the goal of socialists. System 5 is also the leadership of any socialist organization. System 5 can be top down or it can be organically collective, depends on how recallable the leadership is. For example, if your teleological goal is a classless society that minimizes imposed hierarchies or arbitrary hierarchies for only hierarchies of immediate skill, that is aiming maybe to minimize hierarchy altogether, so that hierarchy isn't arbitrary, for example. This is something that a lot of socialists think about. Every cook can govern, but what is the skill level to run a machine, right? So communists want to share skill share as an orientational goal, or hopefully they do, right? Because that skills hoarding creates classes. It's not the primary driver of class or caste in capitalist society, but if a group only has the skills and is keeping it for itself and keeping all others out, they have a class function. It is not merit that allows someone to achieve success in the field. It is access. And that's always true in most systems. You have a skills shared system where you teach a lot of people a lot of different things. And yes, maybe they are better at one role and they fulfill that role, but their role is provisional, so they can be recalled by other people in society. And early primitive is probably a bad word that has a teleological orientation, but let's say earlier societies that are smaller scale, they remove leaders. You can challenge a leader. That's part of a lot of tribal traditions. All right. Leadership is provisional. So you can't not care about your band in a relative egalitarian society and egalitarianism has many different vectors here, but the hierarchy there is provisional. It may be that the leader has absolute power amongst the band until you challenge them. Once you challenge them, if you beat them at the one thing they're supposed to be good at, you get that position. That is an actual meritocratic position too, if you think about it. Now it depends on what the challenge is as to what the vector of leadership is and what you need in your environment. All right. But those are not System 5. System 5 would just say we exist as a band. Our band is in our own survival. All right. And this can be survival as peers. So you can have a relative egalitarian System 5, or survival as such. So you can have different kinds of hierarchy, and they can be established by skill, by merit, by blood, by divine providence, which is effectively semi-arbitrary, etc. All right. System 5 can be all those things, but it has to have a mission and an organization that has a function. Right. So you want to figure out what that mission is. Is the mission conscious or unconscious? What are the virtues, the traits you need for the mission? And how is System 5 bringing in all its component parts? Who's making the decision? A very democratic organization that sets out a mission statement early in its organization when it's only 150 people, but maintains that mission as it expands to millions, is not actually all that democratic. It's a tyranny of the first. All right. That's actually how oligarchy and Robert Michaux's sense of oligarchy tend to emerge. If you're not watching your System 5, how these decisions are made and how the structure of everything else goes, you really can't maintain that stuff. All right. One of the things about cybernetics is it actually gets us out of the problems of bureaucratization, giving people and thus the skills hoarding to individuals as opposed to various systems of communication, thus making hierarchies needed but provisional. All right. You can design it that way if your mission sets it up that way, and that's why System 5 is so important. I'm going to do videos on all 5 systems. System 3 maybe 2 or 3 videos, and I'm going to tell people that I think you should look up. I'm going to put in the show notes Kyle Thompson's tools for viable organizations. You should also read the basic introductions to cybernetics in English. I always suggest Stafford Beer's Designing the Firm. I don't have it on me right now. I have it in electronic form. I also think the lectures Designing Freedom is pretty good. The Human Use of Human Beings by Norman Reiner is kind of what starts cybernetics as a field. And then Rosh Ashby's Introduction to Cybernetics. Now, cybernetics is just one form of systems theory, and it emerges out of a complicated set of mathematical and ecological and engineering principles. All right. I'm going to be supplementing other kinds of systems theory, such as emergence theory and complexity theory and over complexity theory, or when we talk about these things, because when you're designing systems, you want to avoid them. All right. So, for example, there's 3 tendencies that you can see a system wanting to do. It wants to be efficient, so it's going to centralize. But centralizing increases brittleness. It wants to be adaptable, so that plays against centralization, because a highly centralized system is given to cascade failure, meaning if there's a bad leader or a pipe in the system bursts, the whole system fails. Where a highly flexible system may have trouble maintaining cohesion, but does not fail. It is ribosomatic, to use Deleuzian terms. When a power node busts. So it is less efficient, and it can tendency towards overcomplexity. And then there's another thing that I haven't talked about before, which is that variety needs to be met with variety, which can be done in complex or simple ways. And how you design a viable system, and any organization is going to have to deal with that in its various system levels. Now, the reason why I'm hesitant to talk this way is I hate when cybernetic people just start talking about System 5 or recursion and autopoiesis without explaining what they mean with people who aren't embedded in the system, because I can actually use different frameworks for this stuff and it work. Most corporate frameworks are actually based on the viable systems model, whether they realize it or not. And a lot of corporate consultants actually use it to get a corporation functional in a hostile environment. Now, socialists have a different limit than a corporation. Its primary function and its embedded system is to make money within the system, to make money for its shareholders. That is a legally obligated thing, but that's also the primary justification of capitalism, period. To produce profits for shareholders, or maybe for stakeholders too, if you're into the more socially conscious capitalism, which is still kind of hard for me to fathom. That's still about profits for a certain set of people. Whereas other systems don't have that orientation. So, for example, the conservative orientation. Now, conservative here is not necessarily actionary. You could be a liberal Democrat and have a conservative orientation. But the conservative orientation has an easier job than the socialist or radical organization of any type. The conservative organization has a ethos, a system 5, aimed at maintaining a status quo. It already exists. It's just got to protect it. Now, if you read reactionaries like Joseph de Maistre, you will see that that's actually a long-term losing position. But in the short term, it's a position of strength because you don't have to articulate systems that really go against anything that people already are doing. It seems organic. The reason why it's a problem, though, is it's in a defensive position and often is losing coherence. And as it loses coherence, the social group loses cohesion. Look at liberalism today. We don't even know what it is. It means so many different things to so many different people because it is the ruling ideology that's been around in most of the West, whatever you define by that, the Anglophone and European world and parts of the Spanish settler world too, and like Latin America, that we no longer, it's fragmented, it's lost cohesion. What liberté, égalité, and fraternity means have regressed in a lot of ways because they're not socially cohesive. We don't have one definition for what it is. And our politics right now is all about System 5 stuff because we have realignment. Well, that means you're having systemic ethos breakdown. All right. I hope this helps. We're going to go through all 5 systems in the viable systems model as kind of a getting your mind around some of the principles of cybernetics. I'm doing this and doing a bunch of other series. We're doing the social critique series. Okay, whatever. Start off with Zoomers, but I'm probably going to go okay Doomer next. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We're going to be talking about the sociology and what is class, but what are the other implications of these sociological theories? I've realized that just talking about the pure class vector makes them hard to understand because there's a larger systemic framework which people are operating in. And then whatever else comes to my mind around these solo shows. I think I'm going to label this one a nailing it down. All right. I'm going to thank my patrons, my Kano Kahanans, who always empower this. I want to thank everybody for being patient with me as I've been dealing with a death in the family and a lot of functional ambivalence around that. I'm recording a bunch of these at the same time because I've been writing them as I've been traveling around and dealing with my family's issues. So just to speak to that for a second, my Khan Hamans that I owe a shout out to would be Zach, the Virtual Jonathan, Longbeard, and Mason Kerr. Mason K. I don't know. Mason and I have. He's been on my show, so I can say his name. I would like to thank all my Khan Kahanans, and I'm going to go through them by name right now. Josh H, James F, Philip R, Jonah H, Joseph M, Ben W, Joshua B, Philip Robotic, MK, Exo Andrea, Lincoln H, Ivan W, Bella Lugosi is Red, Nance, Kelly I, Tunguska Event, Ben W, Dan H, Zachary H, Zuzua, I think, Alex P, WBS, Michael N, Bucket 3, Kelly I, different Kelly, Kenneth M, Shane, Martin T, Ari B, Max K, Leo, Marshall L, Cody, David P, Thomas J, Ryan W, Jill, Kenny A, Kyle R, Jeremy S, Jesse K, Brendan F, Nathan G, Tyler A, Nueva, Reed R, Soup, Andrew Stephen R, Simerg, William S, Mitch G, Carl S, Patrick, Ivan I, Ryan F, Joel H, Harrison A, Habib R, Algorithmus, Rock for Light, Joachim C, Killgirl Kraut, Brian S, The Night of Sorrowful Faces, Justin H, Electrical Journeyman, Ben H, Wes, Daniel W, Choice Fantastic, Ryan M, and that's all of my Con Kohanans of the last year. All right, thank you all. I know that last bit took a while. Just want to make sure I thank everybody for the help they've given me lately. And I hope you find this edifying.